Okay, so this is video number 3 of Fatbike Grooming Sled modifications. The last video number 2 got cut a little short, so this will be a short one, and then we'll do a 4th one after. All right, just a quick overview of what we're doing next. I'm going to go ahead and take the whole front suspension apart. We're going to pull this bracket here and cut this off of this metal bracket, and that's going to get welded up underneath here where our new bracket is that we just relocated because we had to move the point from here to underneath here. This bushing is getting cut off the trailing arm, and it's going to be reinstalled at our new center point. And then we're going to come down here. This, if you can see it there, it's the sway bar. It goes through and it goes on to the other side. That's coming out, so all I'm going to do when I take all of this apart is I'm just going to take a whiz wheel and just cut that right off right there, and then just slide it through the other side and get rid of that. You don't need that. Also, this muffler bracket, you don't have to pull it off at this point, but it's definitely, you're going to be taking it off at some point, so whenever you get around to it. The shock, which is mounted here, it goes in behind there, is now going to get mounted here on the front after I shorten up the ski stance. So, and then the radius arms, which are these, the upper and the lower, and you'll notice the upper is a little bit thinner than the bottom one. It's fatter. So we're going to be cutting these down and re-welding these bushings onto the new place. So we're going to cut these right here, and they're going to get welded in up here. So in order to do that, there's a couple of steps we have to do to get the ski stance straight, so we'll take care of that now. So here's the new bracket I made up for the trailing arms to mount to. These are the existing mounts that were welded to that steel plate that was in the footwell. So I pulled all that out, and I cut these free from that metal, and then I tack welded them on here and on here as well. And I'm going to go ahead and finish welding those up and paint the whole bracket up and then reinstall it, and that'll be the last time it comes out. Also, this piece of U-channel I had here worked out really well. It's about 3 inches there, and it's about 1.25 inches there. But if you had some flat start steel, you could make it out of that. This is, like I said, a piece of 3 inch, 1.25 inches, and then you could just weld this whole seam, and that would work just as well. And the other thing I want to mention too is when you put these back on, make sure you put the threaded end up here, because this end is not threaded, so you don't want to go through all that work and have to cut it out. And the other thing I did was I cut this piece off of each one. It's a 1/2 inch piece, and it actually works really good for spacers on the shocks when we mount those. So before you go ahead and weld these on, make sure you cut those off, or you're going to have to find something else. But they work really well. And as the other thing is, when you weld this back on, it has to stick out a 1/2 inch from this point here, which is the bottom of the tunnel. That way your trailing arm mounts right here, and you're going to have clearance for it to pivot back and forth there without hitting anything. Okay, now that we've moved the center point for the trailing arm below the machine, it was originally up here. Now it's down here. We had to move it forward a little bit from where the other one was. So now we're going to have to create a new mark on the trailing arm, is where we're going to drill a hole for the bushing. So the way I'm going to do that now is I'm going to take the tie rod, making sure it's connected to the linkage in the front, making sure everything's tight, and making sure the handlebars are straight as well. And then bring this back until it hits and you can't go anymore. And then pull it forward like about 1/4 inch, and then line that up with the hole in your ski spindle arm. So you pull it forward, make sure you're in line there, go back here, pick it up, and then just mark the center. And then there we're going to be drilling a hole here for the new bushing we're going to be installing. Okay, so I have the two trailing arms sitting side by side. If I could find my marker. There it is. So this trailing arm was the right side of the snowmobile. This is the one that we put the mark on for the center of the new trailing arm mounting point. So we're going to lay the two trailing arms side by side, making sure they line up. Over here, everything looks good. It's not going to be perfect, but you can get it close. And then just going to go ahead and transfer that line right there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to carry that line on this side and on this side as well, and drill a pilot hole right in the center of that trailing arm. And then we're going to go ahead and cut it out with the hole saw. This is an 1.25" hole saw I used. And then this bushing here will get installed in there and welded in. So I'll go cut this real quick. But to mention, I'm going to cut it right on this line, right in the center of the hole. This is what we're going to end up with. A nice little bird's mouth. And then our bushing housing is going to sit right in there, and we're going to go ahead and put a weld up there and put a weld on the bottom. And then we can put that back on the snowmobile, put the ski spindle back in here with the ski on it, bolt it up to our new mounting point, and then we can go ahead and figure out where to cut our radius arms. The other thing I wanted to mention as well was on this bushing here, these holes are going to be at a 90 to the trailing arm, whereas the original one on the snowmobile, because the trailing arm flared out, you can see it's at a bit of an angle. So I just wanted to point that out. So I have the trailing arm all done. The bushing's been welded in here. I have the bushing back in it because you have to pull that out, otherwise you melt the rubber. So I put the ski assembly back in to the spindle. And now what we need to do is to figure out what our radius rod measurement is going to be. So I have this piece of wood here, and it measures 23.5 from there to there. And that gives me a center to center on that of 22 1/8. That's what my previous builds were, and it worked out really well. So I'm just going to stick with that. So I've gone ahead, I've cut these bushings off the end of the radius arms there, cleaned them all up, and I put the nylon inserts, all the bushings back in, and I have them inserted in here now. I have two of these, one there and one there. So we need that to get the measurement. You want to make sure this is all tight, so you have to put the bushings back in it. But you want to make sure after you weld these in, tack weld these in here after you cut them, you have to pull the bushings out before you weld it, otherwise you're going to melt the bushings. So what I need to do is make sure that now the center of this is in line with the center of that. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to butt my tape right into that block and measure to the center of this bottom bolt. And I have 13 13/16. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I have 13 13/16 to the center. So that means that it's centered where it's going to go. The other thing I did is I put a 10.5-inch block underneath here to hold the sled up at the proper ride height. So now I'm just going to measure the top radius arm to the center and the bottom radius arm to the center, and then I'm going to cut those and weld those bushings back in there. So the bottom is going to be, I'm just going to butt the tape right to the bushing housing, 9 7/8. So I'm going to write that right there. 9/7 for the bottom. And then the top is going to be 9 5/16 T for top. Now what I'm going to do, since this is the top one, and it's skinnier than the bottom, so you have to keep that in mind, we're going to go from the center of this to what our number was, so 9 5/16. So we're going to go 9 5/16 the center, and then we're going to mark this radius arm. That's where we're going to cut it and weld it to this. And then on the bottom one, it's 9 7/8. So I'm going to hold the tape at 9 7/8 in the center of the hole, mark it at 0, and that's going to be the cut for the bottom one. Just double check your measurements, butt it in, 9 7/8, 9 7/8, the top one, butt it to the center, it's 9 5, 9 5/16. So I'm going to cut the other side exactly the same, and then we're going to show you how to set it all up so that you can weld it and have these bushings be at the proper angle. All right, got my radius arms all cut, ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and tack weld them in. You got to remember that the bushing housing in here, I have the bushing installed, so we just want to tack weld this arm to the bushing, this arm to the bushing, let it cool, and then I'll probably put another tack on the bottom, and then I'll do the top, and then after that I'll pull it all apart, pull the bushings out, and then finish weld the rest of those. So we go ahead and put a tack. Let that cool for a second. Try to get one underneath. All right, let that cool. Then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the upper radius arms. And then I'm going to take it all apart very carefully, press the bushings back out, finish weld it, and then put it all back together. And that should be about it, other than the shock tower and remounting the shocks. And so there you have it. This is the bushing all welded to the radius arm. See, it's at a pretty specific angle. So it's about the only way I know how to do it. So the other thing I wanted to say too is before I took it all apart, I marked the radius arms, one, the two on the left side and the two on the right, just so when I go to put it back together, it shouldn't make a difference, but I just do it because I like to put it back to where it came from. So that's about it for narrowing the ski stance. Up next is the shock tower. So we get everything all bolted up. Just want to kind of grab everything, cycle it up and down, make sure I don't have anything binding or anything hitting or rubbing. And then in the next video, we'll install the shocks, build the shock tower, and then maybe cut the running boards to make those narrow as well. Until then, tune in and we'll see you then. Thanks.